The Quiet Man. Paul Rodgers arrived at the library every morning at 6 o'clock sharp, 2 hours before it opened to the public. He never spoke much, never lingered in the break room, and never shared anything beyond polite greetings. He wore the same outfit every day: brown slacks, a dark jacket with a patched elbow, and a navy cap that shadowed most of his face. In a town like Maple Hollow, where gossip was a local sport, Paul was an enigma that no one dared to solve. He swept the stone steps with careful rhythm, as if the task demanded a sacred kind of attention. Inside, he polished brass door handles until they glowed, aligned magazines by date and spine, and brewed a pot of strong black coffee that he never shared. His presence was consistent, calming. But it was his silence that made him stand out. The regulars at the library had theories. "Used to be a soldier," Mr. Callahan from the front desk would mutter. "That kind of quiet doesn't come from nowhere." Others whispered darker ideas: fugitive, widower, or worse. Paul, of course, said nothing to confirm or deny. He simply worked, nodded, and vanished at dusk like a ghost clocking out of purgatory. Sarah Whitaker, the town's youngest librarian, had watched him for nearly a year. She was 26, curious, and never content with surface impressions. She noticed things, like how Paul always paused at the children's section before leaving, or how he lingered a second longer when he shelved books about fatherhood or grief. Once, she caught a glimpse of an old photo in his wallet as he reached for his ID, just a sliver of a young girl's smiling face and a woman standing beside her, both blurred with age. He had no visible family, no phone, no online records. His employment papers listed a post office box and an emergency contact with a disconnected number. When the town upgraded their library software and staff were required to take ID photos, Paul declined. Said he didn't like cameras. No one pushed him. What intrigued Sarah wasn't the mystery itself, it was the weight he seemed to carry. People who vanish often leave behind noise. But Paul, he had buried his past so deep, it only revealed itself in fragments, brief glimmers of sorrow behind his eyes, a stillness too heavy for ordinary men. One day, as the wind howled through the autumn trees outside, Sarah found herself standing beside him at the service desk. "Have you ever lived anywhere else?" she asked casually. Paul looked at her, surprised, not by the question, but perhaps by her tone. Soft, unassuming. "Too many places," he said. Then he gave a rare smile, one that didn't reach his eyes. "This one's quiet. I like quiet." And with that, he picked up his mop and disappeared down the hallway. Sarah stood in silence, watching the shadow recede. She wasn't sure what she was chasing yet: curiosity, compassion, or something in between. But she knew one thing for certain. Cracks in the silence. The first rail crack appeared on a rainy Thursday. Sarah's car wouldn't start after her late shift, and the parking lot had emptied hours earlier. She sat behind the wheel, cursing softly, while the rain drummed hard against the windshield. Then, through the downpour, she saw a faint light moving, Paul, locking the side door with his usual precision. She called out before she could second-guess herself. "Paul, wait." He turned, mildly startled, then approached without a word. She explained the issue. He nodded once, rolled up his sleeves, and lifted the hood without asking. His hands moved with confidence, familiarity, not just with tools, but with broken things. Within minutes, the engine roared back to life. "You've done this before," she said, stepping out of the car, grateful but intrigued. He shrugged. "Used to fix things. Long time ago." Then, uncharacteristically, he added, "You remind me of someone." "Someone good, I hope," she said, trying to make light of the moment. Paul froze, just for a second, then looked away. "Yeah," he murmured. Her name was Claire. The name hung in the air, heavy with memory. Before Sarah could respond, he stepped back into the rain and disappeared into the dark. That night, she couldn't sleep. Claire. The name looped in her mind like a riddle. She didn't want to pry, but her instincts had been right. Paul was more than a reclusive janitor. He was a man running from something, or perhaps toward something only he could see. The next day, Sarah took a chance. Between organizing old archives and shelving new returns, she began digging. Not through gossip, but through digital history. It was surprisingly hard. Paul Rodgers didn't exist online before 2005. No digital footprint, no address history, not even a tax record. Suspicious in a world where even ghosts left trails. Then she found it, an archived newspaper article from a Chicago Tribune dated August 14, 2003. Financial advisor David Marsh wanted in connection to embezzlement scandal. She stared at the grainy image. A man in a suit, younger, clean-shaven, but those eyes. There was no mistaking them. Paul Rodgers. Or rather, David Marsh. The article painted a different man entirely. Wealthy, married, a father. Accused of siphoning millions from client accounts and disappearing without a trace. Last seen with his young daughter. Her heart pounded as she read. What happened to the wife? The daughter? Was Paul, David, guilty? Or was there more to this story than a headline? She closed the tab, unsettled. The image of him helping her in the rain haunted her more now. There had been no menace in him. Only grief. She needed answers. Not as a librarian. Not even as a citizen. As a human being. Sarah looked down the hallway toward the janitor's closet, where the man called Paul Rodgers would soon begin his evening routine. She didn't know what she was stepping into, but she knew she was already in too deep to turn away. The storm and the confession. The storm returned 3 days later. Thunder rumbled through Maple Hollow as if the sky were clearing its throat for a painful truth. Inside the library, Sarah paced the archives, clutching the printed article like it was burning her fingers. She found Paul in the basement, wiping down the old boiler with methodical patience. His back was turned, but he spoke first. You look like you've seen something you wish you hadn't. Sarah hesitated, then held out the paper. I found this. He didn't take it. Just stared at the wall in front of him, his shoulders tightening. I wasn't snooping, she said softly. I was concerned. Curious. I don't know. Finally, he turned. His eyes weren't angry. They were tired, older than they had been yesterday. He looked at the article, then at her, then sat on the steps, exhaling like a man collapsing inward. My name isn't Paul Rodgers, he said. It's David Marsh. The truth settled between them like dust in the still air. I didn't steal that money, he continued. I tried to expose the men who did. My partners. They were laundering funds, millions. When I refused to stay quiet, they made it clear they'd silence me another way. Sarah listened, unmoving. They threatened my wife. My daughter. I tried to go to the police. The next day, my wife's car was found wrecked on a mountain road. No witnesses. No proof. Just a message. He paused, rubbing his hands together as if trying to warm memories long frozen. I took Claire and ran. Changed our names. Moved from town to town for years. Always looking over my shoulder. And Claire? Sarah asked gently. His face broke. She died in a fire at a motel outside El Paso. Faulty wiring, they said. She was 12. Silence. The kind of silence that wraps itself around a person and squeezes. She was everything, he whispered. Everything I was trying to protect. And I failed. Sarah sat beside him. She said nothing at first, just let the moment breathe. I didn't mean to deceive anyone here, he added, voice cracking. I just needed a place to disappear. To remember her without seeing the world she lost. He reached into his wallet and unfolded the photograph. The same woman and child, frozen in time. The girl's smile bright, unaware of the shadows her father was running from. I come here every day to feel like I still belong somewhere, he said. Even if it's borrowed. Sarah looked at him, not with pity, but with a profound, quiet respect. His truth wasn't clean, but it was real. You're not the only one running from something, she said. We all are, in our own ways. Paul. David nodded. Outside, the storm was dying. Inside, something else had shifted. Forgiveness hadn't arrived yet. But understanding had. And sometimes, that was the first step home. Redemption. The seasons turned quietly after that night. Paul, no, David, kept working at the library, but something had shifted. He walked a little taller, looked people in the eye a little longer. Where once he moved like a man fading into walls, now he occupied space with intention. He still spoke little, but his silences felt lighter, less burdened by secrecy. Sarah told no one. Not because she owed him anything, but because she believed some truths belonged more to the soul than the system. She'd seen the man behind the myth, the grief, the guilt, the flicker of kindness he tried so hard to hide. That was worth protecting. In the months that followed, David began making small changes. He organized a reading circle for children, something he hadn't done before. He even showed up to the town's winter festival, standing awkwardly by the cider stand until Sarah waved him over. People welcomed him, unknowingly, but warmly. And for the first time, David smiled, genuinely, freely, without the weight of hiding. Then, one snowy morning, Sarah found a letter slid under the library's front door. No return address. Just an envelope, hand-sealed and neatly written. To Paul Rodgers. She